Most men don't get punished because they're mean, they get punished because they're merciful. And I know that sounds backwards because you've been taught that forgiveness is maturity, that letting things go is leadership, that being the bigger person keeps the peace. But in modern dating and relationships, forgiveness without structure doesn't create peace. It creates permission. This is the pattern you've seen, but probably didn't name. She disrespects you, she crosses a boundary, she gets cold, disappears, tests you, lies by omission, flirts for attention, starts an argument over nothing, talks to you like you're her employee, not her man. You confront it. She cries, deflects, blames stress, says she didn't mean it, says you're overreacting, says you're insecure, says you're making a big deal out of nothing. And because you care, because you want the relationship to work, because you want to be calm, you forgive her. You drop it. You move on. You try to reset. And then she gets worse. Not immediately in an obvious way. She gets worse the way a leak gets worse, quietly, gradually, until one day you realize the relationship has become a slow negotiation of your self-respect. So today, we're going to break down the real reason she gets worse after you forgive her and what calm men do differently. Not toxic, not loud, not controlling, not manipulative, calm. Because calm men understand one rule that most men never learn. Forgiveness is not the same as clearance. Forgiveness is not the same as access, and forgiveness is not the same as trust. A man can forgive and still tighten the gate. If you don't learn that, you will become the safest man to disrespect. And a woman doesn't even have to be evil for this to happen. She just has to be human, because human beings repeat what gets rewarded and they stop respecting what becomes cheap. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Most men forgive too fast because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. They're afraid she'll leave. They're afraid she'll say they're too strict. They're afraid of conflict. They're afraid of being alone. They're afraid that if they hold the line, they'll lose the relationship. But the relationship is already being lost the moment you teach her this lesson. No matter what you do, you keep access to me. That lesson is a drug. And once she learns it, she starts using it. Now, to understand why she gets worse, you have to understand one thing about the human nervous system. It doesn't respect words. It respects outcomes. You can say, I don't tolerate disrespect 100 times. But if the outcome of disrespect is comfort, closeness, and forgiveness with no cost, the outcome becomes the truth. So what happens? Your forgiveness becomes the reward. Not your anger, not your boundaries, not your speech. Your forgiveness becomes the reward. And here's where men get trapped. They believe they're forgiving because they're strong, but what they're actually doing is reinforcing the behavior they hate. This isn't female nature, this is conditioning. This is psychology. If a child screams and gets candy, the screaming increases. If a worker misses deadlines and gets promoted, the missing increases. If a partner violates boundaries and still receives warmth, access, and security, the violations increase. Not always consciously, but inevitably. And this is why calm men don't just forgive. They forgive with structure. Let's break down the 5 reasons she gets worse after you forgive her. And then we'll get to the calm man rule, the exact framework that fixes this without drama, without begging, and without threats. Reason number 1, your forgiveness tells her your standards are negotiable. A lot of men think standards are something you declare. Standards are not declared. Standards are enforced. Your words are not your standards. Your behavior is your standards. The moment she crosses a line and you forgive it instantly, you've communicated something more powerful than anything you could ever say. This line wasn't real. And now she learns a dangerous truth. She can test the edges of you. She can push you and see what happens. She can take your peace and see if you'll still stay. She can disrespect you and see if you'll still chase her back into comfort. And when she sees that your standards collapse under emotional pressure, she loses respect. Not because she wants to, because her nervous system reads it as weakness. Here is the reality men hate to accept. A woman doesn't feel safe with a man who can't hold his own frame. If your standards evaporate every time she gets emotional, then your leadership is conditional. And a woman cannot relax inside conditional leadership. So what does she do? She tests more. Not because she wants to destroy you, because she wants to know if you're real. And if you keep forgiving without consequence, she concludes that you're not real. She concludes that your boundaries are theater. She concludes that your anger is just noise. She concludes that your standards are just speech. And once she believes that, she stops respecting you. And once respect fades, attraction follows. Reason number 2, fast forgiveness turns accountability into a temporary inconvenience. A man says, I forgive you. She hears, I survived it. Not, I changed. Not, I grew. Not, I repaired. Just, I survived it. And then she's free to repeat it, because what did she actually lose? Did she lose access? Did she lose closeness? Did she lose your trust? Did she lose your emotional investment? Did she lose your certainty? No, she lost a conversation, and she gained relief. That's why she gets worse. She learns that accountability is a moment you pass through, not a standard you live under. And this is where men confuse being kind with being weak. Kindness is not letting it slide. Kindness is giving someone a path to repair. But you can't repair what you never require. So when you forgive instantly, you remove the requirement to repair. And without repair, behavior doesn't change. It only pauses. You'll notice this pattern if you've lived it. After a disrespectful moment, she becomes sweet for a short time. She becomes affectionate. She becomes the good version again. And you think, see, she understands. No. She's stabilizing the relationship so she doesn't lose benefits. Then, once the danger passes, the old behavior returns. Because nothing was repaired, only reset. And every time you allow that reset, you train her nervous system that she can do damage, then go back to normal, and you will accept it. Reason number 3, your forgiveness becomes emotional insurance for her bad behavior. This one is subtle. When a woman knows a man will forgive anything, she becomes bolder, because your forgiveness becomes a safety net. She doesn't fear consequences, she fears discomfort. And once she learns you eliminate discomfort for her, she will unconsciously create more situations that require you to eliminate discomfort again. It becomes a cycle where you are the regulator of her emotions. She acts out. You calm it down. She disrespects. You repair it. She withdraws. You chase clarity. She creates tension. You bring peace. This isn't love. It's emotional labor extraction. And it drains men because it turns you into a relationship janitor. You stop building your life. You start managing her mood. Now, listen closely. Some women grew up in chaos. Some women are used to emotional intensity. Some women have learned that pushing boundaries is how you get attention. If you become the man who forgives without structure, you become the perfect target for that pattern because you are safe to destabilize. You will not leave. You will not hold distance. You will not enforce consequences. You will not allow silence. So she gets worse because she can, not because she hates you, because you made it easy. Reason number 4, your forgiveness removes the scarcity that keeps attraction alive. Attraction is not built on comfort alone, it's built on value. And value is always connected to scarcity. If your attention is unlimited, it becomes cheap. If your access is guaranteed, it becomes normal. If your presence is automatic, it becomes background noise. So when she disrespects you and you still give her full access, you remove scarcity from your presence. You teach her that you are always there, always available, always ready to restore closeness. And that is exactly what makes a man replaceable. Here is what calm men understand. The goal isn't to punish. The goal is to protect the value of your access. If she can disrespect you and still receive you, then receiving you means nothing. And women don't chase what means nothing. Now, before someone twists this, understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying be cold. I'm not saying withdraw for power. I'm not saying manipulate. I'm saying access should match behavior. If she behaves like someone who respects you, she gets closeness. If she behaves like someone who doesn't, she gets distance. That's not a game. That's alignment. And when you align access with behavior, the relationship becomes stable. When you don't, it becomes chaos. Reason number 5, fast forgiveness makes you look afraid. This is the real killer. When you forgive quickly after she crosses a line, she doesn't always interpret it as maturity. Often she interprets it as fear. Fear of losing her, fear of conflict, fear of being alone. And once she smells fear, she feels power. And once she feels power, she tests more. Because now she believes the relationship is tilted in her favor. Now she believes she can raise her demands. Now she believes she can lower her effort. Now she believes she can talk to you a certain way. And the more you tolerate, the more she adjusts her view of you downward. This is why men keep saying, I gave her everything and she still left. Because they gave everything except the one thing that makes love sustainable, structure. You can't love without standards and call it leadership. You can't forgive without repair and call it strength. Now, let's talk about what calm men do differently. Because calm men don't argue for respect. They live in a way that requires it. They don't beg for accountability. They install consequences. They don't demand behavior changes through speeches. They change the environment behavior lives in. And that environment is built on one rule. Here it is, the calm man rule. You can forgive her emotionally, but you do not restore access until repair is proven. Read that again. Forgive her emotionally, but do not restore access until repair is proven. Most men skip the second part. They forgive emotionally and immediately restore access. And that is exactly why she gets worse. So, how do you apply this rule in real life? I'm going to give you a complete framework, not a trick, not a tactic, a system, because systems beat emotions. Step 1, slow down the forgiveness timeline. The biggest mistake men make is forgiving in the heat of emotion. She apologizes, you're relieved, you miss her. You want peace, so you accept it instantly. But urgency is where manipulation thrives. So calm men do this instead. They pause, they don't punish, they pause. Because a pause tells her, I'm not reactive. I'm not controlled by your emotions. I make decisions on my timeline. And the pause gives you something you need, clarity. A man cannot make clean decisions while his nervous system is flooded. So your first line is simple. I hear you. I need time to think. Or, I'm not going to talk through this while it's emotional. We'll talk later. That's it. No long speech, no lectures, no accusations, just composure. And here's what you watch next. Does she respect the pause? Because a woman who respects you will allow you to process. A woman who wants control will try to remove your pause. She'll push, she'll escalate, she'll cry harder, she'll attack, she'll call you cold. Not because you're cold, but because you're not bending. The pause is a test. It reveals everything. Step 2, name the behavior, not her character. Most men either do nothing or they attack. They either tolerate it silently or they explode and call her names. Calm men do neither. They name the behavior precisely because you can't fix what you can't name. Here's the difference. Weak man, you're disrespectful. Calm man, you spoke to me in a disrespectful way yesterday. Weak man, you don't care about me. Calm man, you disappeared for 2 days without communication. Weak man, you're manipulative. Calm man, when I brought up a concern, you flipped it onto my tone instead of addressing the issue. Behavior, pattern, specific. This keeps you from becoming emotional and it removes her ability to hide behind vagueness. Step 3, state the standard without negotiation. This is where men get soft. They turn standards into requests. Can you please not do that? I'd appreciate if you, I wish you would. That language is weakness because it suggests the behavior is optional. Calm men state standards like identity. I don't do disrespect. I don't do disappearing. I don't do threats. I don't do triangulation. I don't stay in unclear dynamics. Notice what that does. It's not a debate. It's not a negotiation. It's a reality. And here's the key. You don't have to say it with anger. You say it with calm finality. That tone is what makes it powerful. Step 4, attach a consequence that protects your peace. This is where most men fail completely. They state a boundary, then they do nothing. They say, don't talk to me like that, but they stay, they cuddle, they chase. So the boundary becomes a joke. A consequence is not punishment. A consequence is the natural result of behavior. If she violates access, she loses access. If she violates respect, she loses closeness. If she creates instability, she loses certainty. Simple. So your consequence might be, I'm going to take space for a couple days. We're not going to see each other this weekend. I'm not continuing this conversation if you're going to speak like that. I'm stepping back until we can communicate respectfully. And then you follow through. Following through is where your masculinity becomes real, not through yelling, through consistency. This is the part that creates the fear of loss, not because you threatened her, because you demonstrated you can leave, and any woman who values you feels that instantly. Step 5, create a repair path, not an endless loop. Here's what calm men do that changes everything. They make repair specific. Most women are used to men forgiving based on words. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. It won't happen again. That's not repair. That's a sentence. Repair is behavior. So calm men require proof, not proof like an interrogation, proof like consistency. A repair path can look like a direct apology with ownership, no excuses, no blaming, a change in behavior over time, a willingness to have a calm conversation without deflection, a willingness to respect your boundaries without punishment. And you say it clearly, I'm not holding a grudge, but trust doesn't reset overnight. We'll move forward when I see consistency. That sentence separates boys from men because boys live on hope. Men live on evidence. Now, let's talk about the part men struggle with most, the emotional urge to restore closeness too early. Because you miss her, because you want peace, because you don't like tension, because you think holding distance is playing games. No, holding distance is protecting value. You are not playing a game. You are setting the terms of access to your life. A man who restores access too early teaches a woman a dangerous equation. Tears, reset. Apology, reset. Affection, reset. So she learns she can cause damage, then use emotion to erase accountability. That's why she gets worse. Calm men break that equation. They teach a new one: respect or access, consistency or closeness, accountability or trust. And once she learns that equation, she either rises or she leaves. Either outcome is a win. Because your life cannot be built on a woman who requires chaos to feel alive. Now, some of you are listening and thinking, "Biu, but what if she genuinely made a mistake?" Good. That's why the calm man's approach isn't cruel, because it allows honest mistakes to become growth, not endings. A woman who genuinely respects you will respond to this structure in a healthy way. She'll say, "I understand. I'll show you." She'll give you space, she'll adjust, she'll repair. But a woman who is used to control will hate this. She'll call you cold, she'll call you manipulative, she'll accuse you of punishing her. She'll escalate. Why? Because you removed her ability to reset the relationship with emotion, and that's the entire point. Now, let's go deeper, because there's a psychological reason your forgiveness makes her worse that most men never hear. It's called moral licensing. When people are forgiven without repair, they often feel relieved, and relief creates permission. It becomes, he forgave me, so it wasn't that serious. He stayed, so it wasn't that bad. He moved on, so I didn't really harm him. Then the behavior repeats because it no longer feels dangerous. This is why calm men create consequences, not to hurt her, to keep reality attached to behavior. Consequences prevent moral licensing. They keep the truth in the room. And here's the second concept: intermittent reinforcement. If you forgive sometimes and enforce standards other times, you create confusion, and confusion keeps people addicted. This is why your system must be consistent. You cannot punish one week and forgive the next. You cannot allow disrespect because you're tired. You cannot enforce boundaries only when you're angry. Calm men are consistent even when they don't feel like it. That's why they're respected. Now, I want to show you how this looks in a real scenario, because theory is useless if you don't know how to speak. Scenario 1, she disrespects you in an argument. She says something slick. She insults you. She talks down to you. Most men either explode or swallow it. Calm man response: "We're not doing this. I don't accept disrespect. We can talk when we're both respectful." Then you end the conversation. No arguing, no explaining. Later, when she calms down: "Yesterday crossed a line. I'm not angry, but I'm not ignoring it. If we're going to continue, I need to know it won't happen again, and I need to see it." Scenario 2, she disappears and then returns like nothing happened. Most men accept it because they're relieved she's back. Calm man response: "I'm not available for inconsistent communication. If you need space, communicate it. If you can't, I'm not doing this." Then you step back. If she tries to guilt you, this isn't a debate. Consistency is required. Scenario 3, she apologizes, but it's not real. "I'm sorry you feel that way." "I'm sorry, but you..." Calm man response: "That's not ownership. If you want repair, it needs to be real. If not, we don't have to keep talking." Then silence. Notice what you're doing. You are not begging her to be accountable. You are requiring accountability to have access. This flips the entire dynamic. Now, some men worry, won't this make her leave? Sometimes, and that should not scare you, because if she leaves because you require respect, what were you protecting? A relationship that depended on your silence? A woman who only stays when you tolerate disrespect is not a woman you're losing. She's a lesson you're finally graduating from. Now, let's talk about the reason this approach increases attraction when it's done correctly, because many men think boundaries kill attraction. They don't. Boundaries create polarity. A woman doesn't want a man she can move easily. She wants a man she can trust to remain himself. She wants to know that if life gets hard, your frame doesn't collapse. If emotions rise, you don't become weak. If she tests, you don't fold. If pressure comes, you stay grounded. That is masculine safety. So when you enforce standards calmly, you become more attractive to women who are healthy, and you become intolerable to women who are unstable. That's exactly the filter you want. Now, I want to warn you about the biggest mistake men make when they hear this kind of talk. They turn structure into cruelty. They become robotic. They become punitive. They start withholding to make her feel pain. That's not calm. That's insecurity in a suit. The calm man doesn't punish. He protects his peace. He doesn't withdraw to make her anxious. He withdraws because access must match behavior. He's not trying to control her. He's controlling himself. This is the difference between manipulation and leadership. Manipulation says, "I will make you behave." Leadership says, "I will only participate in what respects me." That's it. Now, if you want the simplest way to remember everything I've said, here is the entire message in one line. Forgive fast, but restore slow. Forgive fast emotionally so you don't become bitter. Restore slow structurally so you don't become a doormat. That one principle will save you years, because most men don't get destroyed by one betrayal. They get destroyed by 1,000 small allowances. Now, let's close with the real reason men struggle with this. Men want love to be simple. They want to believe that if they do the right things, provide, protect, stay loyal, communicate, then the relationship will naturally stay respectful. But respect is not guaranteed by loyalty. Respect is guaranteed by standards, and standards require risk. You must be willing to lose the relationship to keep your self-respect. That's the cost. And the men who can pay that cost become untouchable, because women can sense it. They can sense the man who will walk away quietly. They can sense the man who cannot be guilted. They can sense the man who doesn't fear silence. They can sense the man who forgives but doesn't forget the structure. And that man rarely gets played. Not because he's paranoid, because he's disciplined. So if you're listening to this and thinking about your own relationship, ask yourself one question. When she crosses a line, do you forgive and restore access instantly? Or do you forgive and require repair? Because whatever you've been doing is what you've been teaching, and she's been learning. If you want to change the pattern, you don't need a bigger speech. You need a stronger system. Pause, name the behavior, state the standard, attach the consequence, require repair. Restore slowly based on evidence. Do that consistently, and one of two things will happen. Either she becomes better because she respects you, or she leaves because she can't control you. Both outcomes lead to peace, and peace is the foundation of everything a man builds. If this hit a nerve, it's because it's real. A lot of men have been trained to forgive like a slave and call it love. But love without standards is not love. It's self-abandonment. Forgive her if you want, but never forgive your own boundaries, because the moment you do, you teach people how to treat you. And once they learn, they rarely forget.